as I said, everyone considers him autistic, especially Ray Monk. This is spent a nice summer series of afternoons on the back deck in the sunshine here in Alaska, reading that book years ago, and it was a great read on Wittgenstein. Keep in mind, though, that I had studied in a seminar on Wittgenstein in college, besides studying him a little bit in philosophy of language. He's really an important individual. In fact, he played a part in my thesis, my graduate thesis, because my thesis was on Hegel, on Hegel's concept of Geist, and a lot of the people I've mentioned, Peter Berger, The Social Construction of Reality, ties, you understand what Hegel's shooting at when you read that kind of stuff. And Wittgenstein initially was a follower of Kant, not because he's really much of a philosopher. He was an engineer and an engineering student. And when he finished in Germany, he, of course, you never really finish. The truly educated never finish, right? So he moved to England to study flight. And at the time, what was going on was ballooning and other things of that sort, really early flight, right? And so he's studying flight in England. He did actually create the first jet engine, which was way too soon because all of the planes at that point were just paper airplanes. And if you put a jet engine on a paper airplane, it doesn't stay on. Too soon, right? But as an engineer, he was also interested in works on the philosophy of language, and Kurt Gödel, no, not Gödel, I'm sorry, Gottlob Frege. I spelled it right. We talk about language. Remember, what we're experiencing here is what's called the linguistic turn. Language is the new prison house. The prison house of language essentially is trapping us. Remember, with Kant, what's the way that we could get to the to metaphysics? How could we understand the a priori, etc.? Well, it has to be the way the mind structures things. Well, where that went was not only do we have natural capacities as a human, but we also have this thing called culture and language that frames everything for us. So we begin seeing things through a language glass, essentially. This is a great one. So that's kind of a play on Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, right? Instead, through the language glass, right? So if you're looking at things through language, fascinating book on that topic if you're interested. Remember, one of the parts about it was really fascinating was one of the prime ministers of England was a ancient Greek, classical Greek specialist, and was working on Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. And what he noticed was that in the Greek text there were only 3 colors: red, black, and I think white was or yellow. Yellow was one of the other ones, right? But there's a couple others that are mentioned, but basically you don't have all the colors that we see. And this was also written at a time when Darwin and evolution was part of the picture. And so the thought was, well, maybe the Greeks didn't see all of the colors that we see today. Maybe their eyes hadn't evolved to that point, right? Well, We don't believe that at all anymore, but we do believe that the language evolved, and we know that the way a language depicts colors and other things will impact on our awareness of those colors, right? I think I mentioned Laura Brodsky and her analysis of that, and the idea of linguistic relativity, right? You know, depending on your language, 7,000 human languages, etc., you're going to see the world differently depending on the language you speak. So through the language glass, and if you're thinking at this point, they all, well, Gottlob Frege, some Italians, Bertrand Russell, who we'll talk about, are all fascinated with studying language and seeing if we can't improve the way language works. Short story here is that becomes eventually, you know, computer code. You know, so they're going to build these systems in an attempt to clarify language. Well, Wittgenstein becomes familiar with the work of Gottlob Frege, who's one of these constructing a formal system, and as a result, Wittgenstein gets interested in this topic, and he goes to Bertrand Russell. He goes to Bertrand Russell and says, "Here, read this." It's his analysis of what's going on, and he says, "If it's any good, I'll be a philosopher. If it isn't, I'll be a pilot." You know, this is just out of the blue, you know, going to a famous, you know, Cambridge professor and just telling him, "Here, read this." You know, remember he's autistic, or, you know, whatever, right? In any case, he comes and sees Russell later, and Russell says to him, "Don't be a pilot." Now, in my mind, he realized this guy is going to be too dangerous to be a pilot. But, of course, Wittgenstein took him to mean be a philosopher. And so he decided to studying philosophy with Russell. He never really was an undergraduate. Instead, he just started, you know, coming in to all the lectures and things and asking questions. There's a movie made about him. I don't know. I haven't clicked on this, so I'm not sure.
The Times, 2nd of May, 1951. Dr. Ludwig Wittgenstein.
There is nothing more wonderful in the world than the true problems of philosophy. Dear Russell, I'm glad you read the lives of Mozart and Beethoven. These are the actual sons of God. I have thought of the possibility, namely...
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. What do we got here?
I'm Sam King, and I earned my
Might be
profit
from the actual
right
movie
here in
I'm
the
thinking
state.
of.
ConocoPhillips, Alaska.
You know, I'd quite like to have composed a philosophical work which consisted entirely of jokes.
Why didn't you?
Sadly, I didn't have a sense of humor.
Let me tell you a little story. There was once a young man who dreamed of reducing the world to pure logic. Because he was a very clever young man, he actually managed to do it. When he'd finished his work, he stood back and admired it. It was beautiful. A world purged of imperfection and indeterminacy. Countless acres of gleaming ice stretching to the horizon. So the clever young man looked around the world he had created and decided to explore it. He took one step forward and fell flat on his back. You see, he'd forgotten about friction. The ice was smooth and level and stainless, but you couldn't walk there. So the clever young man sat down and wept bitter tears. But as he grew into a wise old man, he came to understand that roughness and ambiguity aren't imperfections.
This is
They're what make the world
Wittgenstein
turn.
dying, by the way.
He wanted to run and dance. And the words and things scattered upon the ground were all battered and tarnished and ambiguous. The wise old man saw that that was the way things were. But something in him was still homesick for the ice, where everything was radiant and absolute and relentless. Though he had come to like the
That's
idea
supposed
of
to be
the rough ground,
Wittgenstein as a young man.
couldn't bring himself to live there. So now he was marooned between earth and ice, at home in neither. And this was the cause of all his grief.
That's a segment from a movie called Wittgenstein. There's some others. Let's see. This is a good section here.
I came with you to be part of something. The Empire cannot win.
Sorry about this.
Is absurd.
We must stand together. We will be crushed.
You're right here, and you're ready to fight. Welcome to the rebellion.
Andor Season 2, streaming April 22nd, only on Disney+.
Which automaker employs the most hourly workers in the country? Ford. Which automaker assembles the most vehicles in the
That's how many
country?
seconds I've got to wait?
That's not a coincidence. It's a commitment. A commitment
It's
Ford
eventually
dealers
going to
share
get
by
useless.
offering employee pricing across a full lineup of Ford vehicles.
Now get employee